Hi everybody, it's Geordie from Geordie's Cards. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am creating a one-layer birthday card using Hello Bluebird products. I created this card for the current Hello Bluebird challenge. It's actually a new challenge that they've started up, a monthly challenge. And I used this Party on the Farm stamp set and a piece of white cardstock that was 3 inches by 8 inches. I'm going to create a slimline card today. So the challenge is a colour challenge, as I said, and the colours were very pastel, very spring-like colours. So there was a pastel green, a pastel pink, a pastel yellow and a pastel purple. And I've tried to keep my colouring to those colours as much as possible. So I decided to stack my animals up. I don't know why, I just decided that was going to be a good look for this. I haven't used these stamp sets before, so they have been sitting in my stash for a while and I've been itching to use them, but for whatever reason just haven't got around to using them. So it was really nice to get them out today and have a play around with them. Because they're new, I did wipe them over with my cloth first before stamping them out, and then I did stamp them out twice using Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink so that I can use my Copic markers with them. So I started with the cow at the bottom, the little piggy on top, then the little sheep, and ended up with the little chick at the very, very top. And I was not sure about this, but I think it turned out kind of cute. I was quite happy with it in the end. So off camera, I created masks for the images as well using full stick post-it notes, and I cut those out, and yes, it was quite laborious, but it was worth it in the end. And now I'm just taking some Distress Oxide in Cracked Pistachio, and I'm going to use that for the grass. So I'm using my Lawn Fawn grass stencil for that. It's been getting a lot of use lately. And then I decided to go in with squeezed lemonade, spun sugar and shaded lilac. So I thought that these worked well for all of the colours that were in the colour challenge. So starting with my squeezed lemonade at the bottom, I'm going quite heavy-handed and blending upwards so it's lighter up towards the top. And I'm just using the reverse of the grass stencil to make sure I cover up that cracked pistachio that I've already put down. So my second colour is the spun sugar, and again going in with that, trying to blend into the squeezed lemonade, and it kind of creates quite a nice little orange colour, which is quite a nice transition from the yellow to the pink. And I had blending brushes rolling around all over the place. But just kept going until I was happy with the colour and the saturation of the ink on the cardstock. I actually used Lawn Fawn white 110 pound cardstock for this base, so it wasn't my normal Bristol Smooth. Normally if I'm ink blending I'll use Bristol Smooth cardstock. But this was okay. It was a little bit harder to blend, but nothing major. So I just kept going with the ink blending until I was happy with how everything looked. The little foot of the chick did rip off the mask, so that was okay. It's only a tiny part of the image, and I don't think you'll notice too much when I colour over with the Copics. So now I'm just taking each of the ink pads and just smearing a little bit onto the work mat, and then using some water to spritz it and get some droplets which I can splatter all over the card. So I went quite happily with this, went quite heavy-handed all over. Some of them show up better than others on different colours. The yellow particularly shows up quite well with the purple and the pink. Not so much the other way around, unfortunately, but it's okay. I think it turned out quite nicely, and it just adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of interest to the otherwise quite flat card. So once I'd cleaned everything up, it was time for the fun part, which is removing the masks. I don't know why this is so satisfying, but it really is. It's so nice to see that blank white card underneath ready for colour. I was quite careful with these because, like I say, they were quite painstaking to cut out. So once I had them, I want to reuse them in the future if I ever need to. So I tried to peel them off quite carefully so they didn't rip, and then I can stack them onto the stamp set, ready to use another time. So once the masks were all peeled off, it was time for the colouring. So I'm starting with the little pig, and I'm using RV000, RV10 and RV21 for my colours. I tried to match these as closely as possible to the challenge colours, so that's why I went for these ones. And as usual, just added my darkest shade, then blended out with my medium tone and went in with my lightest. And I did this a couple of times. Because the image was so big, I just started with the head and then I did the body afterwards. So little piggy done, and it's on to the sheep. I'm using W0 and W1 for this one. Wanted to keep it quite simple and blend out to white, because obviously I want them to look like a white sheep. So I'm just adding kind of like little curls, I suppose, of colour to try and keep it looking soft and fluffy like a little sheep in real life would be. So just again adding my darkest shade, then blending out with my lightest, and I did actually bring the Colourless blender, the 0 marker, in as well, just to blend it out a little bit more and make sure that those darker colours faded out to the white evenly. So again, started with his head and then just moved on to his body, but very little colour on this one because, like I said, I want him to look white as much as possible. For the little chick, I'm going in with Y11, Y13, and I did end up adding some Y15 as well. I just felt that the two lighter colours just didn't have enough contrast with them. So I brought in the Y15 as well, just to add a little bit more depth and dimension to this little guy. He's very small, but I felt like he needed that extra little bit of darker color just to kind of make him pop a little bit more, make him look a bit more three-dimensional. So that's what I did, and then I used the Y15 and Y17 to color in his little feet and the little comb and beak on his head. Oh, and I also went in with RV10 for the cheeks. I did that with the little sheep as well. So there we are, I've got the Y17, just doing the comb and his little beak, and then his little feet with the Y15. And then I went back in with the Y17 and added a little bit more shading as well. So for the cow, I started out by doing the udder and the nose, and I used the same shades of pink that I'd used on the pig. I didn't want to add in any more shades. I was still kind of in a quandary as to what colour I was going to do the cow. I didn't really know how I wanted that one to play out, so I started with the bits that I did know the colours of, and then thought about it as I was colouring before I moved on to the other parts. So just the nose, the ears and the udders in the pinks, the RV000, RV10 and RV21. So after I'd thought about it a bit, I decided to use some purple shades for my cow. So I've got V25, V22 and V20. And I'm using these shades to add some kind of spot details to my cow. I know cows aren't normally purpley shades, but I thought this would kind of work. And I think it did in the end. It turned out quite nicely actually. But I really wasn't sure what colour to do this cow. So that's what I decided. I wanted to keep with the colour theme as much as possible, so I decided to go on with these shades. So I've done a little one on his kind of back, one on his head, and I'm going to colour in his tail with these shades, and also a little bit on one of his little legs. I was going to say arms in. Cows don't have arms. On his little leg as well. So I just went over those a few times. The V20 does tend to leach the colour out of the other two. So I just wanted to make sure that there was enough contrast between the shades. And yeah, as I say, I think it turned out quite nicely. I was a little bit unsure at first, but I ended up being quite happy with the result. Once that was done, I took my W1 and W0 marker again and then just added a little bit to the kind of white parts of the cow. Again, just to add a little bit of shading. I wanted them to look white, but didn't want them to remain stark white, if that makes sense. So just added a little bit of shadow using those markers. Finally, I took my W7 marker and I just coloured in the little hooves of all the animals and the little noses of the cow and the pig, just to darken those up. I do apologise that I forgot to zoom back in again once I'd done my little pig, so I wasn't zoomed in for the colouring on this. I really do apologise. I'm still getting to grips with the whole YouTube and filming myself, and sometimes I forget to do things, so bear with me. But hopefully you could see pretty much what I did and where I laid down my shadow. Last but not least, I go in with my white Secure Jelly Roll pen as always and just add some highlight details to my little critters. I also decided to add some little details to the grass. Obviously I'd covered that up when I did the splatters on the sky part of my card. So I thought that adding some little white dots and kind of sparkle marks, for lack of a better word, might look quite nice in the grass. It's very subtle, it doesn't show up particularly well, but I think it turned out nice. Here I am debating whether or not to do it, and I decided to jump right in and go ahead. And I think it turned out okay in the end. As I say, it's quite subtle, you can't see it dramatically, but it just adds a little bit of something. So with all the colouring finished, I decided it was time to add my sentiment. So I've used the same stamp set, Party on the Farm, and I took the sentiment that says, "It's your day," and I decided to white heat emboss that onto the top of my card. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have let the ink dry a little bit longer, but I was always in a hurry. So I did add loads and loads of powder from my EK Success tool to try and combat any wetness left from the ink, and I stamped out the sentiment a couple of times using Versamark ink, and then used some white heat embossing powder on it. It did turn out okay in the end, but in hindsight probably should have left that ink dry a little bit longer. So I melted that off camera, and there's my completed card base. Then I took a slimline card and added a little sentiment to the middle of it, just using the same stamp set again. And then I don't know why I missed all of this off camera, but I cut a purple panel that was 3 1/4 by 8 1/4 inches and layered that on. So it's kind of layered, it's got a bit of dimension. And there we have it, the finished card. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making it today. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, please feel free to subscribe, leave a thumbs up or comment down below.